Talkin To The Trees is the latest album from Canadian-American rock singer Neil Young. I'm Zach of all, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, and devoted Neil Young fan, and these are my thoughts on this new album. So, this came out Friday the 13th. This is Saturday the 14th that I'm recording this, so I just listened to scant moments ago the latest release from a big hero of mine, big influence on me, Neil Young. It's the album Talkin To The Trees. There's been some singles that caused a stir and a buzz and even some lively debates amongst the Neil Young community, at least on Reddit. And so I figured I would offer my insight as somebody who's been a fan of Neil Young over a decade. I've not been shy at the influence that he's had on my own songwriting and my own guitar playing and things like that. So I feel like I have some credentials, at least a soapbox to stand on, if nothing else. Actually, here is my Neil Young CD collection.
All of this, all the way over to my Woody Guthrie CD collection.
I also have some vinyls as well, Neil Young. So it's not that I don't, and I've listened to his discography from top to bottom. And so I guess my most controversial opinion that will for sure get me skewered in the comments, but I don't really care. It's all peace and love, is this. Neil Young has not made a good album since 2012 when Psychedelic Bill.
Your booze mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer.
Now listen, I know you're all upset, and that's okay, because here's my follow-up to that. That doesn't mean he's released a bad album since then. They just haven't been good, okay? This is nuance. That's something that is lost today. So I have the iPad of freedom here, and we're gonna go through this sucker track by track, sharing some of my thoughts, if you will. So, I'm a big fan of Psychedelic Pill, like I said. Lately, things have kind of meandered. I get why some people don't like A Letter Home, or they say it's unlistenable. I mean, there are really no bad albums if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, whether it's Neil Young, Bob Dylan, anybody. There's just albums that don't really work. Or, in my opinion, what is truly the worst thing that you can do as an artist is make something that's mediocre, right? Just average. Like, for example, with things like Coastal, or the album Toast or Barn or things like that. I can't say that these were bad albums. They just didn't work for me. I just didn't know how to feel. I couldn't say, if I asked myself, did I love this album? 10 out of 10. That didn't pass the smell test. My gut, which you should always listen to, is saying, no, that's not true. And then so you gravitate to the opposite opinion, which is, oh, I hated it. And then my gut kicks in and says, well, that can't be true either, because I did like this song or parts of this song. So there are really no bad albums if you kind of follow that kind of line of thinking. But there are mediocre albums, and those are albums that you just don't know how to feel. And the whole purpose of art is to stir up some kind of feeling, good, bad, whatever. Sometimes you're challenged by art, politically, artistically, whatever. And that's fine too, even if you don't like it. So, yeah, story tone also I liked, but I get, looking at it from a songwriting standpoint, not his strongest offering. And you gotta understand that he's in his 70s now, I think, pushing 80. So he's not the same guy he was when he was 25 or 35, doing albums like Harvest and After the Gold Rush and or Rust Never Sleeps with Crazy Horse, or Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. This is a much more mature Neil Young, and so he can offer a lot more insight, which I do think shows up in this album and even subsequent albums from like the last 10 years, let's say. So there's a certain group or small sect of the Neil Young fandom that can't seem to get over the fact that not every album is going to be Harvest. Albums like that are so rare. Like Neil Young has been lucky enough, Bob Dylan for sure, Paul Simon is another one in there where they've been lucky enough to have a couple albums like that in their canon, but by and large those are exceptions, not the rule. So there's some nuance there with that, and I want to be fair, because I do have some critiques of this album that I think are completely legit, even if you disagree with them. So, Talkin To The Trees. Now, when you think about these albums, I always like to think of it as, like, does it work musically? Does it work lyrically, whether there's a message behind the song, or it's just kind of a stream of consciousness kind of thing? And does the overall presentation of the album work? And that's where I kind of think Neil Young, and to some degree Bob Dylan in the last few years, has fallen a little bit short. It's just the overall presentation. Yeah, there's some good songs. Like again, like if I had a big critique of Storytone, which people seem to love to hate, is that like the overall presentation didn't work for me. I mean, the goal of working with an orchestra and things like that did work, but holistically it did not. So that out of the way, let's just start going through this track by track, and again, keeping in mind, does the song work? Does the overall, musically, lyrically, and does it fit the overall picture here? So Family Life is the first track on here. I would say it's a weaker song musically. There's one of my biggest critiques, and this is more of a production side of thing, as somebody who's played on a number of records, recorded myself on a number of records, the acoustic guitar mixes in virtually every song that has an acoustic guitar on it, on this album, is bad. And I can't tell if it's just the microphones they were using or the mic placement, or probably a combination of the two, but the acoustic guitar mixes across the board, not very good. But the song itself is very sweet. I like, again, circling back to that theme of maturity I was talking about, where he's an older Neil Young now, so he's looking back, and the song is very much reflective of it's about his thoughts and feelings and emotions around his family life, his kids, his grandkids, his wife, and his friends, both alive and dead. And so on that level, it works. But the presentation of it, with the bad guitar mixes and the fact that it's just not very interesting musically, it doesn't land for me. But again, is it a bad song? Not really. Dark Mirage is probably up there as one of the low points of this album. It's there again. If they're not that there are bad songs, but if there was a bad song on this album, it's like this and another track we'll get to are among them. It's tonally all over the place, both in terms of music and in lyrics, and it's such a bizarre tune, and I think the reverbs on it are another thing that kind of bother me. And I think looking, a couple years from now, even like 1 or 2 years down the line, are gonna feel a bit dated. So we'll move on to one of the highlights of the album, which is the third track called First Fire of Winter. For whatever reason, this song clicked with me. It felt very much like in the vein of something you would expect from a younger Neil Young, but again, with that more mature voice and that more mature songwriting style. And again, it's not a complex song. It's a very simple song, and there's nothing really wrong with simple songs. Tom Petty has a whole career full of just 3-chord bangers and very simple lyric structure. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just when you try to do things like some of the political stuff Neil Young does, which are on this album, where you take big concepts and try to cram them into like a 4-minute song, that you kind of start running into trouble. So, this one, lyrically it's simple, there's a lot of emotion, it's got a great vibe, so presentation-wise, yes, it works. And even though it's preceded by one bad song, and one kind of not good song, it still fits in with the other two, with the picked albums so far. Silver Eagle, I can't remember a single part of this song just now, being about 20 minutes or so, well, maybe close to 40 minutes or so ago from finishing this album. So that's not exactly the most reassuring thing. Moving on, Let's Roll Again. This was a single that was released, and this one definitely caused a kerfuffle. And I will say, I love it when Neil Young is angry. I don't really care about politics, to be honest with you, in music or anything like that. I am a rare breed, it seems like these days, where I can hear something that I may or may not totally be on board with, but I'm willing to agree to disagree. Or, just let it roll off my shoulders. Not everything warrants a response, but this one, again, it's a simple song, musically speaking. It's very catchy, so for what it's worth, the controversy aside of that, where it comes, and it's a political song, talking about, electric cars and things like that. And if you know Neil Young, he has a passion for cars and classic cars and things like that, and of course the environment. So it's a song about electric cars, and it's sort of a call to action to Ford, Chrysler, GM, these big car manufacturers that all used to be here in the United States, to kind of get get some skin in the game, if you will, for the electric car market. There's, right now that is, something that is being considered by many consumers. I'm trying to tiptoe around this politically. I'm not a car guy. If it's got 4 wheels and gets me from point A to point B, with a reasonable gas mileage, that's cool. Electric cars are something that I think is interesting, and I would definitely like to see more of in the marketplace, especially at affordable price points. Now, the controversy of this song is a specific line where he says, if you're a fascist, get a Tesla, right? So, yikes, right? And then people took that as he was calling Tesla owners fascists, and I was like, not directly. Where it gets kind of dicey for me personally is that follow-up line where it's if you're a Democrat, enjoy your freedom, just buy an electric car. And I know that right now, as of the release of this album and the recording of this video, very turbulent times for the United States politically, and I don't want to make light of that or minimize that. I get it. There's a huge conversation going on, but it seems to me if you're insulting people that might listen to your album, and there are a number of people that sought out Teslas to buy electric cars for environmental reasons, and you're kind of alienating them. Also don't love that it seems to me, and I could be reading into this, and this is somebody that doesn't have any strong political leanings one way or the other, it seems to me that you're calling one side of the aisle, people who tend to maybe like Elon Musk, fascists when they're not really. You're just name calling him and praising your own side. So it seems to me just a little immature to do that. And circling back to what I was talking about earlier, where again you're taking a big concept, which is the environment and environmental care and corporate greed and things like that, and you're trying to tackle it in a 3.5-minute song, which is very catchy. But you oftentimes, and I learned this from experience, partly from Bob Dylan and Neil Young making those mistakes, where they're trying to boil big concepts into very quick songs. Really, the only songwriter I can think of that did that effectively would be Woody Guthrie, maybe Phil Oakes in the 1960s. But, Neil Young is not Woody Guthrie. So it takes a certain mind to do that. Also with political songs, especially if they're overtly political, they have a very short shelf life. So this song really can only exist in 2025, maybe 2026. A few years down the line, we're gonna forget all of this because just things move so much faster nowadays than they did in the 70s and 80s. I hope that makes sense to you all. A good example that you can listen to that isn't Bob Dylan or Neil Young, that's me, would be a song I did back in 2021 called Nihilistic Blues. It's one of the best songs I've ever written. I'm real proud of how it turned out, and there's a music video for it and everything. But if I'm being honest with myself, it does feel, it's very 2021, 2022. It's not as enduring as some of those other songs. When we think of great Neil Young songs, great Bob Dylan songs, Paul Simon songs, they're timeless. You can listen to them in the 70s, you can listen to them 1,000 years from now, and they still hold up. This one will not hold up, even though, yes, I think it's a catchy tune. I think, he has the right to voice his opinion, whether it's annoying to me or other people, or, it may isolate people. That's called free speech. We have it for a reason. So, the song didn't work for me. It does fit in with the other songs on the album, the overall tone of the album. A good example, moving on to a song called Big Change, which again, it's a simple song, also very catchy. It feels much like just a classic, hard rock, well, maybe not hard rock song, but what I'm talking about with Neil Young, where it's just, there's a lot of loud guitars, there's a good drum beat behind it, everybody's committed to, what they're playing. It feels reminiscent of peak Neil Young and Crazy Horse, I guess maybe is what I'm trying to say. So that groove is there, that feeling is there, and the lyrics are simple, and they do kind of are, of the time, they're taking, it's maybe, it's change needs to happen. In other words, is kind of the main crux of that song, right? Imagine that as long called Big Change, calling for change. But again, it's a simple enough song, and I think when you're tackling big things in a short, song, maybe 3-4 minutes, even longer songs, it's best to deal in abstractions, right? Some of the songs we think about from Neil Young's era, like protesting the Vietnam War, they don't specifically mention Vietnam. They tackle the pretty obvious truth that we all at this point know, is that war is bad, and how they go about proving that point is kind of what makes them interesting and adds to that longevity. But the minute you start talking about specifics is where you start putting that the shelf life, you know, on the song, and then you start dating yourself, where you can listen to, there's always going to be calls for change. Doesn't matter if times are good or times are bad, people are going to want change, and change brings good things, it brings bad things, and that's kind of the point, you know, mentioned in that song. So again, this is a good example of, it's weird that he had two songs here back to back, one that doesn't necessarily stick the landing and one that does. So that's a highlight for me. So we have two highlights that get the Z-Man seal of approval. First Fire of Winter and Big Change, and then the song immediately following that, which was again released as a single. It's the title track of the album, Talkin To The Trees, which again, it's a very simple acoustic guitar chord progression. Wish the acoustic guitar mix was better. Could be that I listened to this on streaming and I'm not listening to it on CD or vinyl. I will eventually try to listen to it on either of those two formats, but it's a simple chord progression. There's a lot of emotion packed into the song. He's very reflective, as he often is. It's similar in theme to Family Life, that opening track. So definitely, if you're a Neil Young fan or you follow him on Spotify, you've heard that song. But definitely a highlight of mine. Moving ahead, again, not one that really left an impact on me. Then after that, there's Bottle of Love. Again, don't really have anything interesting to say on that, so we'll head to the 10th and final track on this record, and it is called Thankful. And I think that is also a highlight of the album for me. You know, I love, you know, thankfulness is something that we should all, I know again, we're in turbulent times politically, but there's something to gratitude that kind of wards off the forces of darkness that try to ruin our days, where and he's looking back on his life in this song, and you know, he's had some health issues, there's been political issues, he's had ups and downs career-wise where money wasn't good, like all of us have, and he's just taking a moment to be thankful for that. He's thankful for his wife, he's thankful for his kids, and there's something to be learned in that. I think gratitude would fix a lot of our issues day-to-day culturally. I like to spend some time being thankful for my wife, that I have a job that allows me to do passion things like this, like make videos, buy guitars, release my own music, you know, because it could be a whole lot worse. So hopefully this isn't going to be too long of a video. It looks like it's about 17 minutes and change, so I better get editing on this. Listen to Talkin To The Trees for yourself if you're a Neil Young fan. Form your own opinion. If you disagree with me, that's cool. If you think I'm crazy or something like that, or some crazy left-wing person, crazy right-wing person because I didn't like certain songs on the album, that's totally fine too. I don't really care. The only opinion I really care about is my wife's. I'm Zach Aval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, signing off, reminding you to listen up. You don't have to believe everything that you hear, but you can repeat it. Bread is bread, cheese is cheese. Praise God. Hiya!
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.